I'm Jim Collison, and live from the Gallup studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on September 22nd, 2017. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you do have questions during this live webcast, we do have a chat room that's available for you right below the main video window. If you just look down there on the video, there's a chat room down there. Easy to create an account. You don't have to sign up for one. Just go down, click it, the login button, bottom left-hand corner, choose the guest account, take the guest name and the number out, put your name in so we know who you are. Hit submit, and you can ask your questions live during the program, and I'll be watching the chat room. You can join us there as well. If you have questions, if you're listening to the recorded version or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for your organization, we do that as well. You can contact us. Send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com, for all your Clifton Strengths coaching resources and training needs. Actually, a newly redesigned Gallup Strengths Center. You might want to check that out. Some new features that are there for you. Head out, and then all the information about everything we do is on our resources page at the Coaches blog. Head out to coaching.gallup.com. Allyson, Horne, and Tess Starman are our guests today. Both Allyson and Tess work for Teammates here in Nebraska. Ladies, great to have you on the program, and welcome to Call to Coach.
Thanks for having me here. Thank you.
Yeah, good to have you. Allie, we had you on a Call to Coach, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago. It seems like, I don't know. We got a good chance to kind of dig in and get to know you. But for folks who are watching the video, maybe they didn't get a chance to catch up on that Call to Coach. I want to dig in with you guys a little bit. Tell us a little bit about who you are and your role there with Teammates.
Well, I am our training and match support specialist. So I do a lot of our new mentor training and our academy sessions, because our mentor training doesn't just start and stop with policy and procedure. We are a school-based mentoring program. We're also a strength-based mentoring program. So we focus on a long-term relationship between a mentee, who would be anywhere from grades 3 to 12, and a positive adult, a safe adult in their life. And we focus on a long-term trust-building relationship, but also on building strengths and having strengths conversations. So my role is to do training and certify new trainers and talk to people about what's going well in their mentoring experience, and also where we can help them to improve. So my role, I've been with the organization since 1999 as a mentor, and came on board program-wide in 2009. My strengths education came from the Clifton school at that time. So I have a CSBE certificate in strength-based education, and I obtained that in 2010.
And Allie, your top five?
Oh, did I forget that already? Thank you, Tess. I lead with input, communication, strategic woo, and empathy.
That's awesome. Tess, your turn. We were hoping to have you on that webcast and you weren't available that day.
Yes.
So we're excited to have you. Let's get to know you a little bit.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. It's good to be with everyone. So I lead with context, adaptability, strategic learner, and individualization. And I believe that strengths is one of the best ways to get to know a person, for sure. So it's awesome to be here with everyone. In terms of what I do with Teammates, my role is the research specialist. And so I oversee all of our survey research, all of our data, analytics, reporting, and outcome measurements. And really, that is the main part of my role. And then a sub part of that is I get the opportunity and the awesome pleasure to be a part of what we call at Teammates the Strengths Revolution. And so I get to assist Allie in trainings, and I also do a lot of our online content development. And so I kind of curate our blog, write some posts myself, and then gather guest bloggers for our strengths blog, that's strengths-based mentoring. And then we also have been doing a webcast series.
We're going to talk about that here in a second, but Tess, I want to ask you, when we think about how Teammates is using strengths in the organization, it's just a very high level. Can you kind of tell us that story just so folks have that context?
Sure, definitely. Happy to share. So we started as a strengths-based organization back in 2009 when Allie went through the CSBE training. And really kind of on a macro level, when we look at how we implement strengths within our organization is we hope that all of our mentors have the chance to really help their mentees see what is good and right about them. And so strengths is something that you can elect into kind of as a school district. Since we're a school-based mentoring program, we don't require it of all of our matches. is. But we really just offer it as an additional opportunity to really help bring your match to a greater level. And then we also utilize strengths within our internal workings of our organization, within our staff. So all of our staff know their strengths, and when we get together for staff development days, we always approach everything that we do from a strengths-based lens.
Allie, you want to add anything to that?
It was perfectly stated.
Nice.
I think what's been great about it is the way that we've been able to learn that strengths is not a one time or a 5 times. We do activities, we have conversations ongoing, and that's what we want our mentors and mentees to do. This isn't something you talk about one time during your mentoring match time, which is typically during the school day. We want them to have strength-based conversations always. So we've been very fortunate as a staff. It's been embraced by our organization. That history goes way back to our founder, Coach Tom Osborne, and Gallup's founder, Don Clifton. So that relationship that they had really helped to begin the relationship building, strength-based relationship building for our organization now within 8,000 matches across 5 states.
And for those watching maybe for the first time, Allie, we spent a bunch of time digging out a bunch of things about you and about the organization in the last Call to Coach you were on. So folks can go back and listen to that if they want to dig into teammates. The thing that drew me to this and to you guys, just the reason I want to interview you, because you're using a very unique approach with YouTube to be able to reach a very small niche. A lot of people go to YouTube because they want to get millions of viewers, right? These YouTubers, and I think you guys have very intentionally said, as I've been talking to you, that the work that you're doing on YouTube is really intended for your staff and the people that are that you're trying to reach and in a niche. And so to me, that's kind of interesting. And what's also interesting is that you took on characters for this role of Jen and Millie in this. So first of all, let's have you guys talk a little bit about what you're doing and how you're using it. I want to kind of hear it in your terms. What are you doing with YouTube, and talk a little bit about why you're doing what you're doing.
Do you want to cover why? I'll cover what?
Okay.
So what we are doing is a webcast. So we have a channel on YouTube, Strengths-Based Mentoring, Teammate Strengths Team, I believe is what it's called. And we're doing a series called Jen and Millie. And that was named, and we will give credit to Bob Arp. He's one of our local chapter coordinators, and he leads with ideation, so that's helpful. And he gave us this idea because really the point of this, and you'll get into the why a lot, but we really found that we have very different strengths perspectives because of our differences in generation. And so Jen and Millie is a Gen Xer and a millennial talking about the difference in their strengths-based perspectives. And so we have a YouTube channel, and we try to do about twice a month, every other week episodes in which we just have strengths-based conversations.
We really wanted to take strengths learning to the next level. So once people had gone through training and learned about their strengths, our program coordinators at each of the local community chapter levels would come to a day with us at Gallup and really learn about how to apply this. But we knew that we needed to be able to continue to offer learning. So how this really began is kind of twofold. First thing that happened is I noticed our generational differences. We literally work across from each other. So we have an office, a very open office, and our desks are literally across from each other. And I would use all kinds of references at work that Tess didn't understand. Like, for example, Roscoe P. Coltrane from the Dukes of Hazzard. I would say something like that, and I'd get a blank response. Garth Brooks was talking about influences and mentors in his own life, and he made a reference to Bob Seger. Tess did not know who Bob Seger was, and that concerned me from a music perspective.
Bob Saget?
That's right. Bob Seger.
Bob Seger, Bob Saget.
Not to be confused with Bob Saget.
Same, yeah.
So I thought to myself, wow, I have a lot to learn. And I think I have some things that I want to be sure that Tess knows about. So that's kind of where our dialogue started, really noticing the generational differences. And I think instead of me thinking, oh, that's ridiculous, she doesn't know, or I have no idea what she's talking about, when she would make references to Instagram, for example, or different things, podcasts, group me. I mean, different kinds of technology that I had no idea about. I also realized I had so much to learn from Tess. And then what we found is as we were going out to communities, because we'll go out and do trainings, and sometimes we'll be in the car for 3-4 hours at a time, we were having more meaningful strengths conversations in the windshield time than often I think what we were presenting to the group. So we kind of talked about how can we capture this? How can we capture this windshield time? And the really cool thing about windshield time is it's not scripted. You're just having a dialogue, having a conversation. And I think through those moments, we found that we were learning more about our own strengths and one another's, and then doing a better job strength spotting when we returned. So we decided that this would be something we should share. And so we put together our very first Jen and Millie episode, and we had a really good response.
So how many have you done since then?
13. We were just at episode 13 last week.
And what kind of feedback are you getting from the audience that's listening to it? What are you learning about it? And maybe what have you learned by doing it? Sometimes it's as good for us. I know we do these here, right? One of the reasons I like what you guys are doing is because it's very similar to what we're trying to do with Call to Coach and Theme Thursday. And I think it's easy for people. I think some people think it's really hard to do. And then you've done it. What kind of things have you learned and what kind of feedback are you getting?
I think probably the most meaningful feedback that we're receiving is gratitude for the simplicity and gratitude for the casualness of it. Some people don't believe that we don't go by a script. We literally come walking in the hallway and say, what do you want to talk about today? And we sit down and we talk about it. Sometimes it's around different topics that are right up there. Maybe it's in the news. Sometimes we had a whole episode on music, and I brought in my vinyl and cassettes. And I talked about the meaningfulness of a playlist. And then we had this big running joke about how Tess doesn't create playlists with CDs. She creates them on Spotify. So I am learning from Tess. So we'll have these conversations about different things and self-care and different strengths activities that we use. But then while she's sharing about something or while I'm sharing about something, we're really listening for strengths in action. And we try to call out those strengths and we try to demonstrate how simple it is to strength spot. So whether you've had a year and a half of education around strengths, or whether you're brand new to strengths, or whether you've been doing it for a while, all of us can be gifted strength spotters if we're listening, and we're listening in everyday conversations. It doesn't have to be a formal conversation. It doesn't have to be a presentation. It really just happens in everyday conversation.
And I think one of the things that we have learned most about it, and we've received the most positive feedback on, is like you mentioned, the fact that it's just a normal conversation. Like we bring our coffee mugs and we have our cards in front of us for those that might be watching, but we're really just talking about everyday things and using them and then reflecting on that through kind of a strengths-based lens. So we often will sometimes have a strengths activity, sometimes not, sometimes talk about random subjects. But I think that people really enjoy that because oftentimes when we go to communities, or even if you're around in other strengths-based organizations, you might receive like a 1-hour training or a 2-hour training or a full day of training, which is so beneficial to get an introduction to strengths. But then people don't know what to do with it after that. People don't know where to take it or where to go or how to bring it to the next level. And so I think it might be confined to that area. And what we have found is that learning about our strengths has pervaded every area of our life. Like we've both learned about it through working at Teammates, but it's impacted my schooling, my education. It's impacted how I relate to friends, how I relate to my family. I've had my parents and my siblings take strengths, and I know the same has been for you. And so I think that really we wanted to expand that windshield time, like Allie said, to allow people to understand that strengths is so much more than the confines of where you learned about it or where you first took the assessment, or like we like to call the super fun survey. Whenever you first took that, it's a great place and great initial learning, but those conversations can happen in any context you're in any area of your life. You can be spotting, you can be recognizing your own strengths and the strengths of other people.
And I think the cool thing that happens between us is clearly we have an age difference. And yeah, it's crazy. Clearly we have an age difference. What I love about the learning that I have is that Tess brings a different perspective, a fresh perspective, a perspective that comes along with her generational awareness, but we talk openly about the struggles too. A couple episodes ago, we talked about what are the assumptions that are made about your generation that you wish people knew otherwise about. And we were both able to share about that. And so I think what we want our mentors to see, because there's a generational difference in teammates, a school-based mentor who comes in as an adult meeting with a third or a fourth grader or an eighth grader, they're going to have a generational difference. But the learning does not, the mentoring doesn't always happen from the mentor to the mentee. It happens between both. And in strength-based conversations, that really leads to that. So I learn from Tess always in all kinds of different ways. Now, not just around technology, but in the unique ways that she sees the world because of her strengths. And so when we can talk about that as well, the struggle moments in our strengths moments, the good times, the bad times, the sunshine, the swamp. And I think what we've heard from people is they like our maybe vulnerability and rawness in which we talk about things. We don't always agree, certainly. So it's been a great way for us to have a dialogue. And you can pick up on those moments. I think our viewers can pick up in the moments where my face often reacts. Not good at the poker face.
The communication.
Yes. And she can see that I'm reacting in a way, and she may just say, okay, Allyson, what's that about? And so it's real life, I think, between us. And that's been a cool thing.
So Connie in the chat room says, Jen and Millie episodes are great teaching tools of how our mentors can connect with their mentees, right? Or with their mentees. And so do you guys, are there conversations that go on about that actual relation? I mean, is it mostly about that? I mean, you give the tips, not just on the strength side, but you also give kind of those relationship tips on how to make those connections?
I think what we probably do is model good listening, which is one of the most important qualities as a mentor. And we also model authenticity, which is, in my opinion, the most important quality as a mentor. You know, coming in and just being who you are, not trying to be someone else, not trying to act as if you have all the answers. I think that's probably been where we see some modeling happening both ways.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting because we have like multiple topics. Like we talk about strengths, we talk about generational differences, but then also definitely both of those play into a mentoring relationship. And there are times where we'll talk explicitly about mentoring, but I think a lot of what we're doing is just modeling intergenerational conversations. The fact that when you walk into a mentoring relationship with teammates, you know that there's going to be diversity, at least on an age basis, on a generational basis. Likely you're going to experience diversity in other ways, differences between you and your mentee, maybe socioeconomic status, education, background, things like that. But you know, because it's an adult to a student, that there is going to be generational differences. And I think that what we really try, kind of the base of it, as much as it is a strengths-based podcast, as much as it is a mentoring podcast or webcast, what we really aim to do is break down assumptions that people might have. Especially, I mean, I'll say this, the millennials, there's a lot of assumptions made about the millennial generation, but I think that the generation then after it, Gen Z, like there are all these assumptions now being made about these youth that are growing up with so much access to information, so much access to technology. And so being able to model what it looks like to have an intergenerational relationship that really is honoring to both sides.
Right.
Tess, you just mentioned Gen Z, and they're appearing to be a very different, or can be a very different generation than we saw with millennials. As a millennial, you've probably heard for the last 10 years, millennial, right? And yet you're now the majority of the workforce, and you guys are you're in place, right? It's how, when you approach how you're going to reach the generation down below you, what are your thoughts to that generation? And are you starting to think about, okay, now I'm old, like I'm the old person, right? Have you had that thought yet? And what are your thoughts around that?
Have you had that thought?
I have thought about the fact that I'm old. I do think that every once in a while, because I remember when I was, and this is definitely my context if you want to spot it before I even say it, when I was like in elementary school or even middle school, I remember thinking kids in college were these people that I would look up to, or that I would think, oh man, that seems so old, or so, wow, it's going to take me so long to get there. And now that I'm like out of my undergrad, it's like, oh man, like 23, 24. What am I supposed to do with the rest of my life? Like, no more big milestones.
Like, you're
And
the
so
adult now.
I'm like,
oh
I'm
my
the adult.
gosh,
What?
I am
Who
the
gave me
adult.
this responsibility? Responsibility is 25 for me. So I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what to do. And so, and the whole term of like adulting, I'm like, it's a lot to figure out. And but I think when I think about, so I am a mentor as well, and I have a fourth grade now mentee, and she we started last year when she was a third grader, and so she's in that generation. And when I think about it, what I love about teammates is that we have a pretty strict no social media policy. And so when Allie trains, she says we aren't phony friends, and she holds up a phone, not just fake, not just putting a frame out there of what my life is, but also we don't interact with technology. We interact face to face, and I think that is becoming increasingly rare that you have a strictly face to face friend. And so I think that that's something that I have learned from the generations that are above me. I am a letter writer. I love to write and handwrite letters, and so. But I understand the importance of having face-to-face relationships, that when you're in the same physical proximity as someone, you learn so much more about them because it's so much more than what they might type or text or say or write. And so when I think about modeling to the next generation, and interacting with them, I want to do it at a face-to-face level, at a real level that tries to break down a lot of those barriers or facades that may come up with social media, but also learning how to then use social media and model social media responsibly, calling out and keeping people accountable for when they say something online that they might not say face-to-face, and being able to not only set an example of what a physical in the physical presence of someone else, what kind of a relationship like that can look like, but also what a responsible online presence looks like. I think that that's a really big thing for me.
Allie, do you want to add anything to that? Specifically, we're on the, I don't want to say we're on the outside looking in, but you and I are in the X generation looking downstream. And I'm starting to work with high schoolers who are outside of that millennial group and seeing some differences, and I'm thinking about them. As you think about the group behind Tess, any thoughts? And these are the kids, right? These are the students that are you thinking, especially in the way you guys are training, are you doing anything different for them?
I think, well, first of all, she's so wise. I mean, I was writing down because I'm thinking, oh, well, I'll be using that terminology, the facades of social media. My mentee's an 8th grader. I'm constantly learning from Haley how to better understand what today looks like from the 8th grade lens. And I think anytime that we're interacting with any other generation, if we stop to imagine what does that feel like in their shoes today, I am very grateful that I didn't have social media, because I can promise you, with this wonderful strength of woo, the whole universe would have known everything about me and all the great decisions that I was making in the 1990s. I think it's important for us to think about, what does it feel like to be in this person's shoes today? We can do that with high school students. Last night, we played a board game at home. We played Cranium. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. And I loved that our teenagers loved it. I was kind of amazed, frankly. But I think one of the things that we are really proud of as an organization is that our mentors and our mentees walk away from time together with this renewed sense of engagement that says this has meaning. And it's because of the physical presence, the face-to-face conversation. You can't get that from a text. You can't get that from gaming. You have that in the moment, in that presence of self. And when you have someone in your life, and whether that's me to a grandparent, or from me to Tess, or me to my 8th grade mentee, and you can say, I want to notice what is right about you, and I'd like to acknowledge that, that affirmation goes so much further than anyone can even imagine. I mean, I think about just some of the things that my mentee has said to me. I talked with her about what I was like as a 7th grader, and I even brought a picture, which was really bad decision in the big picture. But she helped me understand that 7th grade today even looks different than what it was like for me. And to be able to share those moments with her, it helps me in all kinds of ways. It helps me be a better employee. It helps me be a better mom, a better friend, a better sister, when I'm thinking about what does the world feel like in someone else's shoes.
So Micah, my co-host on Theme Thursdays out there listening, and she says, how do you instruct your mentors to address assumptions? How do you model that with your interactions with each other? So when you're doing that, this Jen and Millie, how are you modeling that in addressing assumptions that are made about generations?
Well, I like that Tess made the comment that you're bound to encounter diversity with your mentee, even if you look alike, even if you sound alike, even if you're growing up in the same community, you're bound to be different because you're growing up in a different generation. So the example I always give is when my mentee was interested in purchasing an iPhone. She talked about it all year long and said, I just can't wait until I can text my best friend. And she said, Allie, how long did you have to wait? And I said, like, 30 years. So in that moment, that was the first time Haley ever looked at me like I was from another planet. And I was so glad that she did, because that's a low-level example of diversity. You're going to encounter diversity with your mentee, sometimes in a way bigger, grander scale. But if you show up and you are truly your authentic self and you share who you are empowering your mentee to feel comfortable doing the same. Same thing with our strengths language. We always talk with mentors about what strategic looks like on Tess looks completely different than what it looks like on me, because of the other things that blend into that, the other strengths, but also my values, my experiences, my personality. And so I think our mentors feel a sense of relief to know that they don't have to have it all figured out, and they just really are supposed to show up and be themselves and learn and be open to learn about their mentees' culture, their perspective, their views of the world.
And I think one of the big ways that we do that is when we're becoming really cognizant of when we start to learn from each other from a generational or a strengths-based lens. And so when we're having conversations in our pod sitting right across from each other, and she mentions something like Rasco P. Coltrane, and my face is blank, it's like a mental registry. Oh, that's something we can talk about on Jen and Millie, an example, because she then had to explain to me, and me being me with high learner, I went right to Google and Googled it and to figure out what that even was. And so just those instances, or when we make assumptions or use strengths as labels, oftentimes we'll try to be really cognizant of that and say, okay, well, I hear Hannah laughing in the pod next to me. I can say, oh, Hannah's positivity. But there's a line between spotting it and then it becoming a label. And the tone that you use behind that. And so I think that the way that we really try model for matches is to just have open dialogue about it. And I think to admit when we don't know something, and that's something that we teach our mentors all the time. It's, you are not, I hope that you don't know everything or think that you know everything walking into a mentoring relationship, because you're going to learn as much from your mentee as they'll learn from you. And so going in with this openness, with this vulnerability, and with the message that it's okay not to have the answer. And that could actually, instead of being a detriment, be an opportunity to learn together. If neither of you know, or if you learn from your mentee. There have been so many times where my mentee has said something that I didn't know. Like we were at the zoo in May, for example, and we have this big end of the year celebration with teammates. And so my mentee's in 3rd grade, and we're walking through the aquarium at the Henry Durley Zoo in Omaha. And we're getting to the end where all the jellyfish are. And my mentee makes a comment about how cool it would be to have a tank of jellyfish in her bedroom. And I was like, oh, that'd be great, like a fish tank. And me being me, I wondered out loud. I was like, I don't even know what jellyfish eat. I should look that up. And my mentee, like hearing me, responds, I think they eat algae. Meaning algae. Like the fact that she even knew that they eat algae, and then she said it wrong was just so cute. But the fact that I get to learn from her, and even if she didn't know, I would have pulled out my phone and Googled it and said, hey, let's learn about how to take care of jellyfish together. Seeing those instances where we don't know where the other person's coming from, or where we don't know something together, as opportunities to learn and to grow.
Micah says that piece about admitting when you don't know something, she's most impressed by that in your podcast. How important, you take a big risk. You're in public. You're admitting you don't know. I'll be honest with you, in the webcasting we do too, it was a huge risk to take the Gallup name to a webcast that's really one and done, right? We're one take wonders. We produce them. We don't edit them. I'm assuming you don't do a lot of edits. How did your leadership see this? And how did they grapple with it, or did they in the very beginning? Those early days are a little rough, right? You're kind of like, everybody's like, what are we doing here? How did that go?
Well, we proposed it really as an idea for continued strengths learning. maybe going away from the PowerPoint, going away from the formalized classroom. And so we just kind of proposed it that way. We really said, let's try this and see what happens. And we did a promo, which we then, we showed it at our, we have leadership meetings in the spring. And I would say it was kind of a mixed reaction. Tess and I were laughing the whole time, no matter how many times we watched it. But other people were kind of like, what is going on here? I think the openness to let's try it and let's see what happens has really been another great example. We don't have all the answers. We want to see what works. We want to see what fits. The response that we got right away, to be quite honest, shocked me. First of all, I didn't think anybody watched it. I still probably don't believe that anyone watched it until someone emails me and says, oh, I love that picture from the kayak. And I'm
really?
like, what? But I also think that the awareness for all of our mentors, I mean, we have a lot. It demonstrates try what works and try again and try again. We're big proponents of growth mindset around here. So we believe that, part of the learning is in the struggle. We certainly did not have this down, and we don't yet. We're hoping to kind of come up with a blooper reel that Hannah, our awesome marketing coordinator and production specialist here, she could put together a blooper reel. We've had people walk in the middle. We've had, all kinds of things happen. We've had the camera die, and we haven't edited it or cut it out. We've just said, here's what happened today. I think that shows what the mentoring relationship is like. Anything can happen. Be present, stick with it, show up anyway.
And I think a big thing that helped our leaders get on board is, like you mentioned at the beginning, Jim, it's a pretty niche group. Like, we're keeping it pretty close circuited, that unless you know our YouTube account, which we have like 9 subscribers, I checked the other day. And so unless you know, it's not going to show up on your suggested viewing for YouTube or anything like that, because we don't have a billion subscribers. But unless you have our direct YouTube channel name, or unless you're on an email listserv that we send out, that's how we push out our videos, you're not going to come across it or stumble across it. And I think that has helped, because we are pretty targeted in who we're having these conversations with and for. And so I think that has helped leadership get on board, because we're not putting it on our social media pages. We're not sharing it with the world. We're keeping it pretty close-knit to our organization. And that doesn't mean other people can't watch. We would love for all of you to watch an episode or a few episodes if you would like. But really, the aim of it is to help enable and expand these conversations and help model them for our matches.
And we always do a follow-up email after each episode. Episode is funny. We started calling them that after it was referred to Saturday Night Live. After every episode, we send out an email with a follow-up with the link and then the resources that we talked about. Sometimes those are strengths activity. Sometimes those are a book suggestion. It's been all over the map of what we talk about. We try to include that so that it's really seen as a tool to be utilized. So it's probably, as far as being utilized or viewed, it isn't within that niche, but also as a tool to be able to send out to mentors who are strength-based mentors. And they may take it a different direction. They might decide to use one of those conversations with their mentee, and they might not.
Have you guys thought about spinning anything off of that yet? In other words, you've been doing this and you had another idea of like, hey, we did it this way, but we could do it that way. Have you had any thoughts where you may spin something off?
Today we talked about doing carpool karaoke. That may be a possibility. Hannah has a GoPro, so we might be able to utilize that. We've also encouraged people to reach out to us. Tess, definitely did more of a plea on the blog. Would you be willing to, write a blog piece for us? And we've had some great ones. They have been so good. But also we've got some ideas on having guests into the Jen and Millie group. So we've got a couple people in mind for that. So I think just expanding it, but really encouraging people, if this is something you would be interested in doing, to give it a try. If anybody, if I can do this technology-wise, and granted I have great people around me helping with that, anyone can. But I think it's just capturing and encouraging conversations.
And one thing we talked about from the very beginning in terms of spinning off is recording strengths in action, recording strength spotting. And that's something we have yet to really put into practice. But we talk a lot and we use the term strength spotting. And that's really just as you're going about your normal day, recognizing strengths in one another. So we do it all the time sitting across from each other. And we talk a lot about in your conversation, but also in your nonverbals. So we have a coworker who just recently left to go to law school, and he led with deliberative. And he used to sit in our pod with us, which us, period, bless his heart, because we would be chatting all the time. And this poor Brandon, he's sitting over there just working away. But when we would ask him a question or bring something up to him, he would physically remove himself, take his hands off of the keys, sit back in his chair, and like unfocus his eyes. So he wasn't looking at anything because you could tell his thoughts were just going. He lived deliberative and analytical. And so he was just processing the information. And we knew we only had to say it once. We didn't have to over explain ourselves, even though sometimes both of us did. Both of us, one of us did, because we knew he was processing that information. And so we like to strength spot one another all the time. And so one of the spinoffs that we've talked a lot about, and we really just need to start doing it, is capturing those moments. And so getting short testimonials of people's strengths, filming, having them reenact their strength spotting. So hearing Hannah laugh from her pod when no one else is in there at all, because she read something funny and her positivity is just oozing out of her all the time. And so recognizing those strengths in action and capturing those and implementing those into our Jen and Millie time. I almost imagine it in like Sports Center when they do reels, and you like can note and annotate on them and talk about what happened there, recognizing that strength in action.
You also did start a strengths playlist.
I did.
You have is it through Spotify?
It's on our YouTube channel. So if you look up our Jen and Millie videos, I just created a strengths playlist based on one of the resources that we got from Gallup. And it was a bunch of Gallup employees, I think several years ago, that submitted songs that went with each of the 34 themes. And so I just found all of those videos and tried to get like the lyric videos to them. So they're not all high quality, but I just mashed them together in a strengths playlist because we've had a lot of people ask about that. We did a whole episode on music and strengths and generations. So that is on our YouTube channel as well.
No, that's good information. When you guys thought about starting this, and when you're in studio, and I brought some gear over yesterday, the microphones and some things, but how did you think to get this? Because I'm always interested in sets, and I think people sometimes think they've got to invest in a bunch of money to be able to do something like this. Tell me a little bit about physically, how did you guys get started?
We found space in our office, and this was it. And Hannah, who is just very, very gifted at A, running the camera, B, keeping us timely. So she's got this like wrap it up kind of signal that goes on. She's also kind of our bodyguard for the door. Literally, it's hard to describe, but this is this is our tiny little conference room, and our offices are literally right over here. We did add some strengths books behind us that are part of my library that are in my office. But this is it. And we just sit here. Typically, we don't have a microphone, and all we have is the camera, and Hannah uploads it to YouTube.
And so we haven't purchased anything to do this at all. All it costs us is our time, Hannah's time to help us and help produce it. And it's a camera we already had with our organization to capture other events that are going on with teammates, and then us just using the physical space.
Yeah, I'm always interested because I do this all the time. That when it came to see you yesterday, I'm always interested what's behind the camera. Like for me, I had something completely different envisioned for the space you guys had.
I bet.
And I came in, I'm like, oh, there's a kayak in the middle of it.
Yeah, there is. There's some maps on the wall. Yeah.
No, it's a pretty average workspace.
Yep, it is.
That you probably had to move some things around to have lunch in there yesterday.
Yep, we did.
You had to, let's slide this aside. But my point is I think a lot of people think it takes a lot of resources and a lot of equipment, and you can throw a lot of equipment at this, right? I mean, this is something you can do a lot of, but it is actually pretty simple. I think I sent you guys a parts list of a way to upgrade that maybe is $300. And you're like, oh, okay, well, $300, that's not too bad. You know, there's some things we can do with that. Have you gotten any negative feedback from, you know, Allie, you said initially, you know, leadership was maybe a little, you know, oh, okay. But as you've been going along, have you gotten any negative feedback from any of your listeners? Like, ooh, that really struck a chord with me and I didn't like it. Or have you had any of those kinds of things happen yet?
We have not. We've had very positive feedback. Again, I have to say I was almost surprised at, you know, someone being willing to take time out of their week. We do it basically about every other week, twice a month typically. We have people who say, I look forward to your episodes. We have people who say, is it coming? What's next? What are you going to be talking about? And we're usually like, we don't know. But so far it's been very positive. I think for the two of us, it's time we look forward to. I leave the Jen and Millie sessions more engaged. I come into the Jen and Millie sessions sometimes all over the map on my level of engagement. But that's what it's like in my conversations with Tess anyway. After I leave a conversation with Tess, and I'm very excited today because after this afternoon, I have a coaching appointment with Tess. And so I know I'll leave that time even more engaged. But just thinking about how it kind of puts me back in focus on why we do what we do and why that it's so meaningful. We're just sitting here having a conversation. Hannah records it and we send it out. I mean, it's really so simple, yet I think has such a broader influence.
And I think that has been really helpful. I think the only negative feedback we get is from ourselves because we tend to be our own worst critics and worst enemies in that respect. We walk away and we're like, what did we even just talk about? And then we get such positive feedback. And we talk a lot about not necessarily like other assessments, but we talk about how they interplay with our strengths. And so one of the ones we talk about a lot is the 5 love languages. And both of us have words of affirmation higher. And so if we were to have received a lot of criticism, we
wouldn't be talking today.
Yeah, we wouldn't be here today. We'd be like covering in a hole, but cowering in our office space back there. But we have received so much positive encouragement from other people that have said, it's just so real. It's so honest. And that's honestly, when we talk, we kind of laughed, Jim, when you came to us and you were like, we want you to do like, I'm thinking you'll be in character for this first part. And we both look at each other and we're like, what are you talking about?
This
it's
is us.
us. Like we don't script anything. We're just who we are. And the names Jen and Millie is just to kind of highlight our intergenerationalness and the difference in generations and perspectives from that place. But I think that's been I think, and we're speaking from our own perspectives, but I think that's what's been most powerful for people is this is us. If you were to come and sit at Brandon's desk, which is now vacant, within our office, you'd experience the same types of conversations that we have here.
It's good to know. And honestly, as I watched those, I thought the early ones, I thought there was more character development to it. But as I've gotten to know you guys, and as we've gotten to know you, yeah, it's just you being you. I think that's a great way to be able to portray that. Allie, I think you said something interesting a moment ago about people waiting for the next one. And I think one of the power I watch a lot of vloggers now, these guys who are creating video, ladies, men and women who are creating these videos of their life, right? They just every day or every couple days they pop on. And I find myself waiting for the next one. Like I wonder if Jesse's going to produce one today. And because I'm very interested in what they're doing. I think you guys will find that as well the more you do. I mean, if you stop doing it, I think there would be people that are disappointed. Any work for the parents or for the students themselves where you guys are thinking you might create some content that would be appropriate for them?
One of the things that I'm working on actually because of the success of Jen and Millie, I'm working on a match support YouTube channel. So 5 to 10 minute videos for our mentors. It could be for our mentees, could also be for parents. Anyone would be able to view those. But because we saw the positive response, we thought, okay, 5, 10 minute little clips to remind you of maybe policy or remind you of this resource or remind you of the inspiration of being part of mentoring. I think that'll be something that we extend on. I think also too, the more that we have these conversations and the more that we're able to do this, when I look back, Hannah's really good at capturing like a blooper or a funny in the beginning. So the first 30 to 45 seconds are a funny, and then it leads into this really cool music. And then this, I'm going to say it right, Bitmoji that they forced me to create. This Bitmoji graphic, it's like it sets the stage for we're getting started. And you can kind of see in us the evolution of comfort.
Yeah.
We're no longer looking at the camera. We're looking at each other. We're just having dialogue. And there are times where we fumble, and there are times where we don't really know the direction we're going. And then you're really good at looping me back in, like when I start to go down some other path. I think when we think about what might be, maybe we could do a Jen and Millie that's designed for students. Or maybe we could do a Jen and Millie that's designed for parents, because no doubt I've taken these conversations home with me and I've shared them with my own kids. So I'm thinking, that might be Jim, you're so good at giving us new ideas.
Ideation 7 right there.
Ooh, there we go. It's my 7 too.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yes, it's the best. Well, Woo is the best, but
I don't know about that.
Yeah, no, I know you struggle with that a little bit, but you'll come to see it my way eventually, Tess. That's the essence of Woo, right?
I don't know.
Woo in
Go
action.
back and listen to or look at the chat from the context theme Thursday yesterday. It seemed like everyone wanted context in their top 5.
I did
just
say
saying.
I did say I have serious envy over context. So I did say that yesterday. You guys have name tags that are in front of you there. Any significance to that? Do you use them in some way on the program?
Every time that we strength spot, we try to go and point to that strength. We like to have the name cards in front of us. So if it's a new viewer who just came on, they know what we're referencing. Tess has a beautiful name card. She created that, I think, like the first time she did a strengths activity. And I love that she's kept it because she describes her so beautifully. I try to draw mine with little input means, passionately curious, the woo. I mean, if this defines jazz hands for me, communication is like a word bubble, the empathy heart, the strategic pathway. And then I'll let Tess describe hers, but we like to have them in front of us so that if you're tuning in, that's what we're talking about. And when we strength spot, we actually point to them.
And we use these with our strengths trainings that we do across our entire region for teammates. So whenever we do a strengths training in a community with mentors, we'll have them create their own name card with their name and their top 5 on it, depicted however they want. And so my top 5, I draw context kind of as a globe, the idea to see kind of the big picture and the back picture to what we're looking at. Adaptability, I always draw as a palm tree, which came from Theme Thursday Season 2. Micah described adaptability as the palm tree because it amidst hurricane winds, water, storms, it has the ability to bend, but it never breaks. So the ability to be flexible. My strategic looks like recognizing patterns and how things work together really well. And so I depict that as puzzle pieces. Learner, I just draw a book because I constantly am soaking up information through, if it's a book, a podcast. In my individualization, I am not an artist, but I draw little stick figures in different colors and sizes, just the ability to see the uniqueness of people. So we just ask mentors to put their name in their top 5 and depict their top 5 however they want to. If some just write their top 5 down. Most do, is some like to draw pictures with it. I've been in a session where, and this was working with preschool teachers, so makes sense, but they all just, a couple of them just did pictures and didn't even put words and had us associate the strength with that picture. So it's just a great way to have strengths in front as we're going about a training or a session or a conversation so that you're able to recognize and remember what other strengths, to be able to spot strengths in one another.
I think selfishly as a trainer, I like these too so that I can see my audience and I can think about, okay, the way that I approach this, if I have a lot of positivity or a lot of developer, that's going to help me in the way that I give an analogy or a metaphor. And then also anytime that we're doing any kind of strength activity or we're teaching an activity, we have mentors practice it. So we want this in front of them and we get them practicing strength spotting before they ever do that with their mentee.
That's a great idea. It's those little things that are specific to what you're trying to do, or you've adapted something. We've often seen people try to print the top 5 and make it professional. And for you guys, it's very personal that way, right? I mean, that name tag then becomes a personal component. With my students, when I have them in a classroom, I ask them to do the coat of arms, where we use those big white sheets of paper, you can peel off, and they're like big stickies, right? Yeah. And they draw a representation of their top 5, and then we actually have them posted at their workstation, right? And it gives us an opportunity throughout the summer to point to things, because I think that's the important thing that you're saying in this is that you're referencing it, pointing to it, and that then really sets in stone and emphasizes or affirms that piece in them, right? By the way, when you were talking about that palm tree, to be adaptable, it has to have super deep roots.
Yep.
And I think we miss that in adaptability sometimes, right? And that people who are adaptable, they're not wishy-washy all over the place. They can have such deep roots that they can do the things, like they can adjust. So as you mentioned that, I remember Micah and I talking about that. How cool is that though, right? To be able to have these moments where we can point to it. We would say sometimes call it an Ebenezer, right? They would stack these rocks in important points in their history so they could come back and remember it. And these name tags are kind of your Ebenezer.
Yes.
Definitely.
You know? Pretty cool.
It's funny, you're right, they are so personal, and I didn't even realize it till you kind of said that. This is my favorite name card. I have made multiple name cards since then, but this one is my favorite, and I carry it with me, and I feel a little out of place, and this is my context if you want to spot it. I feel out of place in a training if I'm leading a session if I don't have this one with me, or I have to create a new one. I get flustered or anything like that, because this is, I spent time on this, I was intentional about it, and it's depicted in the way that I want it depicted.
And I love that she uses that word intentional, because we're almost accidentally intentional here so often, because I noticed she was like, it is, but she kept coming in with the name card. And I was like, oh, I gotta get my name card. And then we started to, we would physically, metaphorically point to the strength when we were affirming it. And I thought, that's like really, really good. We got to keep using the name cards. So we're constantly learning and evolving as we're doing every Jen and Millie episode.
Yeah, I think I'm going to steal your idea, by the way, because there are times when I've done teaching, especially strengths discovery teaching, where I don't take advantage. There's an opportunity for someone to write a physical representation of who they are in a way that they're most comfortable with, and have that displayed in a way that they can take with them among their peers. And I don't know if I've done that enough myself. We've done it other ways, but I think there's times when I could take that exercise where we go through the insight guide and have them highlight, cross out, and circle, right? We do that for the individual development plan process, but then transfer that to a name tag. Okay, we're going to make a table 10, or you're going to make your own name tag. And that's a really good way to transfer that on. So can I have permission to steal that from you?
Absolutely.
And one thing I always do when I'm doing sessions, and I've worked a lot with my church really recently on strengths-based development, I encourage them to keep this. And so with all the development that we do when we go into communities, we're only privy to 1 hour of the mentor's time, or 1 hour of the time of an hour and a half of training that we might do within our organization. And so I always encourage groups that I'm with to keep these. And when they come back for their weekly meeting or their annual check-in, annual progress report, to have these in front of them, so that it just is it's a physical, tangible trigger of strengths, a physical representation that has the strengths listed. So you don't have to say, oh, what are your strengths again? Or remind me, so that can be in front. And when it's a name card, it's right in front of you all the time. So when you're in conversation and dialogue, even if it's not explicit, you're implicitly seeing right there their strengths, and you can spot them, have just a greater opportunity to recognize and spot those in what you're doing.
I think one of the things that we've found is that students are so good at this. Especially elementary students. So they do the Strengths Explorer assessment through teammates, and they're identifying their top 3 of 10. And we'll ask them, to tell us about that strength, and they explain it more beautifully than we could ever explain it. But when we allow them to explain it through their own words, it becomes more powerful, and you see almost that immediate ownership. So I think part of this came from what we saw elementary students doing. They've been our greatest teachers in the way that we present strengths.
Yeah, I think at that age group, they're so genuine and have not been ruined by the pressures of the world.
And labels.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think they give us the truest insights to themselves and to us in these individual themes, because they're unfiltered, right? And I think when you talk about learning from your mentee, I think there is often more learning opportunities to be a mentor. And learn from them, right? We may get more from them than we give to them. And just a very, very powerful tool. Ladies, thank you. And make sure you thank Hannah there for me as well. You've mentioned her several times. But Hannah's done a tremendous job in making sure this worked well for us, and it was a perfect. It goes so fast. I could go another half hour, 45 minutes, maybe 2 or 3 hours with you guys, but I appreciate both of you.
Victory lap.
It has been it's been great being on, and thanks for coming out. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
You bet. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com. Send us your questions or comments if you got anything on this or you'd like to get more information. Even be a guest blogger. Tess mentioned she's blogging there, and if you got some words that you want to blog around strengths to us, we have some opportunities for you to do that. Send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Put guest blogger in the subject line, and we'll route that around to Micah and see if we can use it. You can also catch the recorded audio and video of this program as well as all the past ones on our social resources. Tess, you called it right. It's a podcast. Then you corrected it to a webcast. That's just the name we came up with 5 years ago because nobody knew what a podcast was. And so we're making that change back because everybody knows, I think, at this point what a podcast is. All those are available on our resources page. Go to coaching.gallup.com and click the resources tab. If you found this helpful, and I hope you did, by the way, there's tons of stuff buried in here that if you didn't take notes, go back and listen to it again. We hope that you found it useful and that you would share it. And with that, we'll look forward to seeing you on another Call to Coach. And we'll say goodbye, everybody.